I hope you guys all got to check out my YouTube channel and check out from the very beginning, the very first episode, taking Kapono to college, and then leading after that, we did a little podcast sit down with Joshua Valdez. Um, I did a little interview, or I did a little episode where I sat here and kind of explained my background as to who I am. I'm not going to give you everything. I'm going to give you what I want to give you. But with that being said, yeah, led right into a little episode where I spoke about my oldest daughter. And then yesterday dropped, excuse me, I'm a little thirsty, but dropped a little episode or two actually yesterday. Finally, the vlog on my trip to Salt Lake City with my youngest daughter. Kensington road trip to NAIA sevens in Salt Lake City, as well as dropped back to back the podcast episode number 2 with Joseph Kennedy, and it already looks like I need another haircut. But anyways, don't mind my injury. It's a long story. I'm about to explain that on another podcast. But anyways, yeah. So tonight I'm shooting a little episode and giving everyone the kind of the background on the relationship with my son, my other son, Kapono Mao, who we shot the very first episode of the whole father figure channel to kind of kick off with. So, with that being said, I'm sitting there texting with my son, and he was like, "Oh, I'm about to go to dinner, yada yada yada," and he said, "FYI, please say something nice about me." So, with that being said, we're gonna kick right off into this episode with back in January 17th of 2006, Kapono Mal, Kapono Kapono Steven, I'm sorry, Kapono Steven. We named him Steven after the two grandpas, including myself, Steve Jr. We named him Kapono Steven in recognition of my father-in-law, my dad, and myself. Taulauniu, the Samoan name. If you haven't noticed, all my kids have Samoan middle names and English middle names. So like Skylar is Skylar Aliitasi after my mom, Susan after my um, mother-in-law's mother, my wife's grandmother, and then Kapono is Kapono Stephen, and I just explained the two grandpas plus me. Taulauniu is after my mom's dad. Kensington is Kensington Kate after my wife's grandmother, Kate. Um, name Asia Singa is after my dad's mother's name, and then Sunny Alofa, Paxton Mao. So Sunny Alofa, Alofa is love in Samoan, and then Paxton is a name that my I want to say I apologize, sweetheart, if I messed this up. If it's in your family, but Paxton was a name that she really likes, and so we named Sunny Alofa, Paxton Mao. The funny story about that is, I know this is about Kapono, but I had to bring up the fact that she wanted to name Sunny Paxton Alofa Mao, and then I told her, you do realize that you just named our youngest Spam. So Sunny Paxton Alofa Mal would have been Spam. And then she changed it. She was like, "Holy cow, you're right." And then yeah, so thus came Sunny Alofa Paxton Mal. So we had to switch it up a little bit because even though he is different ethnicities or whatever, we just couldn't do my guy like that. So with that being said, going into this whole episode about my son, Kapono Stephen Taulauniu Mao. Um, what can I say? I gave you the birth date, and then he's my first son. With Kelly, and man, as soon as we started this whole ordeal, right? Skylar was there. Her little brother came along, and in normal fashion, you know, Usually, older siblings are kind of like, "What the heck is this?" Right? But in normal Skylar fashion, she took it on as, "Okay, cool," right? And so you don't need to know the details in between as to why Skylar was born in 2000 and Kapono was born in 2006. But other than the fact that when he came along, Skylar jumped into full like mommy mode as far as she's a great sister, great big sister, even down to my 3 year old. And so we'll gather that and more intel, and we'll get into more of that as each story about my children progresses from Skylar to Kapono to Kenzie to Sunny. But anyways, Pono falls into a different category. He kind of noticed, he's born, such a blessing. My little guy, same thing. Skylar, she came to be, spoiled the shit. I friggin', she's my golden child number one, right? As far as being the oldest, and then my son comes, he's the first boy, the only boy, right at that time frame, and so he falls suit. But the difference between my girls and my son, and he'll even tell you this, is that as our relationship progressed, he kind of saw like the way I treated my daughters in comparison to him. You know, at the time being, my wife, this is her only boy, her only baby, and as their relationship grew, with each passing year, and I'm old school, right off jump, I'm on his ass and I'm on his head since he was born, and my wife just couldn't understand it. And so, with that being said, um, in every video about each one of my children, I will always thank my wife. Always thank her for the balance that she's kept in between my relationship from my oldest to my youngest. Because in an old school setting, as even though it's 2021, or even if the relationships happened in the 2000s, I'm always keep it old school. She can't, as much as she couldn't stand it, or couldn't get it, or didn't like it. I'm always gonna keep those old school values, right? And so, Kapono hits the age of 5, and Kelly was like, "Okay, cool," he's old enough to play tackle football, right? And Skylar's doing her thing. She's playing softball. Kapono comes along, and I kind of told her, I was like, "Well, you know what? I'm gonna introduce it to him, but I'm not gonna force it on him." Pono did like hip hop dance, and Pono did like a bunch of different things. And thankfully to my wife, you know, she has that more broad point of view as to far as how our kids should get down or whatever, right? She's just Kelly. But we reached the age of 5, and football comes into play, and I don't know how to coach football other than the way that I was taught to play football. And so with each year that passed, right, the intensity level picks up. And so a lot of people always sit there and say, parents, they live vicariously through their kids, and they're terrible the way they treat their kids, and so on and so forth. Man, I just hear a bunch of whining and crying ass mumbo jumbo from parents. Skylar knew that, mom already made it to D1. Ain't no living vicariously through her. She been there. She done that. Same thing with me. Even though I didn't make it D1, like I played the game at a high level, even though, whatever, right? I only made it to junior college, but if I would have had my head screwed on a little straighter, I probably would have, you know, if you're related to me and you know me, like what I was able to do back in the day on the football field. I'm not saying that I was, super amazing or like just out of the ordinary, but I was coached by very amazing men, and at the level of football that I was able to play the game at was pretty good. It wasn't bad, So Pono, like I said, he did baseball. He did all these other things. I wanted him to find a different avenue other than just football, right? Because stereotypically, Polynesians are, especially for the boys, it's just football. It's football or bust, right? And so introduced the game to him, played it, and I can't, man, that's my favorite saying on here. If you haven't already picked it up, I can't lie. My son playing felt so good, man. It felt so good in my heart. It felt so good as a whole. It just felt good, man. That he looked at me and I was just like, bro, how about baseball? And how about this or that? Or how about something else? How about trying something else? And he said, Dad, hell no. Baseball, boring as hell. This, that, and the other is boring as hell. He was like, Dad, I want to play football. So from 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, we played at Cypress Pop Warner. And here's a funny thing, right? So Cypress Pop Warner, we actually at the time from 5 to like 7, Pono met like good friends without even knowing who they were. He met good friends, the Amasio kids, um, man, Max, right, and then his buddies that played out Modern Day and Edison and Semi and their cousin, right? Man, and all the little Tongan homies that he grew up and got to play with. Actually, later on, we all full circle come back and meet them later on, but I'll get to that as well. But 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we go over to from Cypress Pop Warner. We kind of see that it's kind of weak sauce. Go over to Los Alamitos. That picks up a little different pace, right? And at 8, 9, we actually meet his senior coach in Romeo Pelham, and then we make friends with my boy Bruce Bible, who's gonna be on my podcast sit down interview here soon. But we meet from 5 to 8 and to 9. We meet so many amazing people, family, friends, the Valdezes that I introduced you to in the very first episode of our podcast, right? And the Roth, the Sanchez's, the man, you name it, the Stovers. And I'm missing so many more kids, but from 5 to 9 in that short amount of time span to meet lifelong friends, like sports. If your kids ain't in sports, like I'm a big advocate of it. You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, we've built, and not only from softball, but the football as well, so many amazing relationships. So, with that being said, you know, the intensity level from 5 to 9 and my relationship with my son grew like instantaneously, like drastically from 5 to 9. And everyone's probably looking at me right now going, you're a little psycho. Like, that's weird, bro, or that's crazy. And that's, if you know, you know. And I'm not here to judge anybody else's parenting path. Like, I'm just sharing what I've been through with my family and the recipes that we created between my wife and I to raise successful kids. So we're not saying that it's perfect, and we're not saying this is the way you should do it, but this is that was our get down, you know. So I mentioned all those amazing people, right? And so from 5 to 9, my son and our relationship just like fast forwarded. And mind you, Pono was one of those kids that every summer from 5 to 9 had to lose weight to play tackle football. And now looking back at it, people might have called CPS on us. But it is what it is, He had to lose about 10 to 15 pounds every year from 5 to 9 to to play tackle football. And a handful of his homies, his day ones, who he's still best friends with, right? I mentioned that in the episode with Joshua Valdez. It was all well worth struggle, the pain, a little bit of tears from my son as far as the game goes and the difficulty of it, right? And so I'm gonna share before we go from age 9 all the way up as far as our relationship goes. But I kind of tricked my son into playing this game. I really, like I said, I really wanted him to do something other than play football. There's so many different avenues that he could have taken. But I tricked him into playing the game for the simple fact that, wholeheartedly, to be honest, I wouldn't be around if it wasn't for the game of football. The game of football taught me core values as far as being able to show up on time for something, being able to be a leader, being able to take direction without any feelings involved, being able to humble myself if something didn't go right, and figure out a way how to make it right and go forward, right? I tricked them into playing the game for those core values. And then it also, like Coach Mitch Olson, who was my head varsity football coach at Kennedy High School here in La Palma, California, he literally was my second dad. And as I stated in the introduction about my relationship with my dad, it was my dad was a hustler, a provider. Mitch Olson, to me, as far as being my coach, was kind of filled in the gaps when Pops wasn't around. And, Pops did anything and everything, and always to this day still does that. But with Mitch Olson being my mentor as far as the game goes, on and off the field, he kind of allowed me to know what it was to be a man, right? A man shows up for people he loves. A man shows up regardless of if he's tired or not. A man shows up when the everything's against him. The odds are against him. The chips are down. A man shows up because he's needed. And so ultimately, that's why I tricked my son into playing the football game. You know, being the fact that he was able to obtain a D2 scholarship and receive monies to go to college to further his education, that's the icing on the cake. But along the way, he was able to learn everything that I learned. And for that, I'm very thankful. And so we'll go from, I explained a little bit of the from 5 to 9, and we leave, Los Alamitos, Pop Warner with Coach Romeo Pelham, with Bruce Bible, uh, with our guy Eric that was there as well. And, we transitioned over to, I'm going to be real, I'm going to call it hood football. Football is a physical sport. It's a gladiator sport, and it's over the years it's been changed into something weird and whatever. I'm not gonna go into all that. I'm gonna just leave it for what it is, right? I got X amount of years until my grandson and my 3-year-old get into the thick of things. But I feel like because I have the knowledge from every single amazing coach that I've met along the way, and then everything that I've been through with my son, my grandson, future grandsons, my little 3-year-old, Sunny Alofa, they're going to have the upper hand on the competition. And so, with that being said, from leaving Pop Warner, I told my son, I said, bro, you're not going to excel and you're not going to get better and you're not going to have the upper hand if you keep going in and week out, whooping everybody's ass. Like, that's just not the way it works. With the game, you have to be around the wolves and the dogs all the time. So from there, we leave and go to the Wilmington Pilots. And the Wilmington Pilots at the time, they're no longer around. And people might be upset with what I'm saying as far as the status of that Wilmington Pilot Bang Bang, Pilot Gang Business Boys team goes. To me, hands down, one of the most elite youth football teams I have ever seen. Because for the simple fact that when these kids rolled up onto the field, fear came over people and the competition that they saw. And then, if they didn't know who they were, they definitely felt them after. Because, alongside the bodies being laid up on the ground, the amounts of heat and anger coming from the steam from the parents on the other side of the football field. Yeah. So, Mr. AJ Tuitele is the head coach alongside a handful of amazing guys, amazing Usos that I got to meet. AJ Tuitele, if you don't know, he is hopefully soon another podcast interview that I got lined up. But anyways, he was a Wilmington pilot here in Southern California, the Harbor Bay area alumni. Went on and graduated from there and played for the University of Oregon. And then after the University of Oregon, he has a bunch of business ventures all over the place, but he ultimately created the island's best, um, the island's best All Star game, right? And it's one of the most premier All Star games on the West Coast to this day in 2025, and they play it out in Mesquite, Nevada, Utah, wherever that is. But if you know, you know. But yeah, those handful of years, I dropped my son off. I didn't coach on the staff. I coached the younger Problems 9U team with a bunch of my Usos, Kessler, Big Mike, Mutu, man, and my cousin ET. And so there was a brand that was there, and the brand that they created was not only bully ball, it was just, being able to mold and grow dominant young men, right? And so from 9 to about this time frame, we're talking about we got kids, they got kids all over the United States of America as far as elite athletes in top programs from the high schools to collegiate. And so, yeah, we were there with AJ, and I watched my son, his level of confidence grow. I watched his play grow, technique, you know. And so it's like for those that know, as far as like things like cockfighting and dog fighting goes, I know there's what do you call those people that are protecting of animals? I'm sorry if this upsets them, but you can't get a dog to be a dog unless you surround them by dogs and you make them fight with other dogs. And my son, just his from 9 to about 11 or 12, the amount of dog in his heart just excelled, right? It excelled. And so we spent a couple years. They were national champions. My son and I got to travel across the United States and play other amazing youth programs. And then from right before 12, I want to say 12, we parted ways. And a lot of people looking at this go, "Oh man, you guys just be jumping all over the place." And I don't give a, excuse my language, but I don't give a flying fuck what anybody says. You're gonna always, as a parent, put your child in the best situation to grow, best situation to be successful. And that's exactly what I did all the way through his youth days and his high school days. And so from Uncle AJ to Itele, we move over to the the Spartans. We played with the White House with Uncle Max Williams. Max Williams, another amazing. And then, dude, mind you, from all these youth teams, right, until like the point we get to Max Williams, everybody knows everybody. There is no like, there is no shade, there is no drama, there is no BS, and there is like friendly competition wise as far as like us men. That's just the way we are built. That's the way we are wired. But everyone knows everyone, right? And so the White House, we came upon this team. They previously, prior to becoming South Bay Spartans, they were the Carson Colts. And so, with that being said, we get to Max, and Max was like, "Bro, welcome, Moose. Let's do it." Right? And so, and if you don't know who Max Williams is, he is another father who I'm going to have for sure on a sit down interview. All three of his sons went D1. All three of his sons had successful high school careers. His oldest, Max Williams Jr., balled out and then, balled out at USC. He's on to other ventures. His middle son, Mason Williams, went to ASU, on to other ventures, balled out at ASU. His youngest son, and I'm sorry for the oldest and the middle Williams, if you guys ever see this, but I've always felt that uh, Marcellus was the best athlete. Not the biggest dog. I want to say I give that to the two older brothers, but Marcellus is just something different, man. And so he's at SC right now. And so, mind you, Pono's got to meet all these amazing kids, all these kids that are all over the United States of America playing at a high level for football, right? So we're at the South Bay Spartans, spent an amazing time there. Um, the relationship with my son just keeps getting tighter and tighter because, we jump from the pilots traveling, we get to the South Bay Spartans, we're traveling. And my son, along the way, with not only the football, but he learns so much as far as traveling etiquette. He knows how to get through a TSA checkpoint. He knows how to take care of his own shit when he's at a hotel. You know what I'm saying? Like, and just the maturity level of my son just keeps growing alongside with the sport, because the sport is a driving point, but it's not everything, right? And so we enjoy that. We become, we're national champions with the White House as well. We got some rings, had a bunch of good times, made a bunch of good friends, and now all his buddies that are there, even them too. There's a handful of our friends and sons. One's at Alabama, one's at Oregon, one's here, one's there, and so you know Marcellus will, or no, sorry, um, yeah, Marcellus. I'm sorry, Marcellus is it's his last year, and we had one more year. We leave the Spartans on good terms, and then we jump over to meeting Uncle Les Fifita and Auntie Winona Fifita over here in Orange County, California, with the Orange County Buckeyes. You know, and mind you, every single step of the way has been calculated, right? Not by me. I'm always going to say this, and this is something upon meeting Les Fifita, something that he's always brought up. I remember we were on a trip to Florida, and he looks at me and he goes, "Zeus, God loves us," and that's something that I'll never forget, because with that reminder of how much God loves us, it just sticks in my heart every single day. And so we go to the Orange County Buckeyes for his last eighth grade year, right? And mind you, my son was supposed to go into the ninth grade that year. But I told my wife, I said, listen, I've always had it in the back of my head that I wanted to hold him back. And I'm going to catch a lot of heat from a lot of hold back haters. I'm telling you now, I don't give a shit. It was the best thing that we ever could have did for my son, for the simple fact that, you know, I want to know as a dad and a parent as to why we are in such a rush to rush our children out of the house. What for? Especially living in Southern California, everything's fucking expensive. So why am I in a rush to push them on? You look at how much our state education system has failed, as far as like, oh, no one's left behind type shit, right? And let's just keep shoving them on to the next grade, and then they reach the 12th grade and they don't have enough credits to graduate, and yeah, anyways, but yeah, so I had spent a couple years bringing that subject matter up to my wife, and she was like everyone else. She was very skeptical, and she was very just like, oh my gosh, what will other people say? And I had to stop her there. I don't give a shit, two shits, three or four, and five, as to what other people have to say about what we do in our home. We're gonna do what it is that we feel is necessary to place our children in a good spot to succeed. And then the last thing I told her was, "You get an extra year with your son. You gonna be upset with me about that?" And when I told her that, she kind of got quiet. So, COVID came and it wrecked a lot of things for a lot of people across the United States of America, but it didn't stop us. I'm not with any of that shit that had gone on during that time frame as far as lockdowns go. Everyone else was on lockdown. My kids still went to school. My kids still went to school. We still traveled. We played ball, this, that, and the other, and we continued on. So from the finalization, we made it up Ponos last year with Uncle Vivita at the Orange County Buckeyes. We fell short in the championship game against Las Vegas Strong, and then it was time for him to move on from youth football to high school. And granted, his seventh and eighth grade year, like I said, the eighth grade year, I made him repeat just because it was perfect. The repeat year was COVID year, and no one was able to do anything. So yeah, I'm not gonna send him to high school to go waste his time. You know what I'm saying? Especially when majority of the kids were staring at a laptop screen. And so, that time passes. I'm 2 years prior to him getting to LaSalle, I was there. So I started my journey there with the coaching staff. Shout out to them, even though, I might not be on best terms with the head coach and his son. It is what it is. I have nothing against them. You know, Coach Coves, that's still there. Coach Iman, that's still there. Coach Bo, that's still there. Um, Coach Nye, still there. My guy, he had a lot to do with my son's development in the high school level. Um, yeah, he gets there, and everyone's like, "Oh man, that guy's son's gonna start because he coaches there." I'm letting you know now that was far from the truth. So you're hearing it from the horse's mouth right now. My son went there, and he could have went to Mater Dei, could have went to Bosco, he could have went to Servite, he could have went anywhere else in the Trinity League. But my son went there because I felt like it was a even playing field. And then on top of that, you gotta keep it funky. The education system at Los Alamitos High School, 100 times better than those Trinity schools. You heard it from me now. That's just real, and they helped my son prepare for college, and the academics is amazing, hands down, amazing. And so he gets there, and at the time he's a freshman. We just so happened to book a trip for my oldest to have her 21st in Tennessee, and even though I'm on the staff, et cetera, we weren't not gonna celebrate my oldest. Excuse me. And so leading up to that point, he's calling me up. He's like, "Dad, man, I don't know if I'm a star. I've been working my butt off, blah, blah, blah." Mind you, like I said, Coach Snyder, Greg Snyder, amazing human being. Mauso is the head O-line coach at the time. He's like, "I don't know, Dad." And I call him on the phone and we're talking, and I'm out in Tennessee, and I say, "Son, all of this preparation from 5 years old till now has prepared you for this time. I don't want to hear it. If you didn't win out the center spot, you didn't win out. I didn't come over here to coach for me to be able to just hand you something. I've never handed you shit in your life. So why would I start now?" So for anybody that ever thought that, I did that because so I can dial my son in to hand him some shit, you got me fucked up. I'm just being real. I'm ask Kapono now. I'm not the one. That's not me. That's not the way I get down. And so we get to that first game, and the phone rings, and he's like, I did it, Dad. I went out the spot. I'm starter. And I told him, you did that. I didn't do shit as far as making that decision. You did that. That's why I raised you the way I raised you. That's why I did all these things to this moment, is to prepare you for this. So he balled out. Great first season. And mind you, he's snapping to five-star quarterback Malachi Nelson, who's at the University of Texas El Paso. The wideout at the time, Makai Lemon, who is at University of Southern California. So mind you, been around dogs. Been around dogs. You know, we get to the first round, and we put up a good fight against Bosco. But the best part about that, even we played against Bosco, Pono's going against his cousin, Jairus Satele, who's at Fresno State, putting it down and holding it down like his daddy did. Rest in peace. You know what I'm saying? And so from there, we get whomped on by Modern Day his sophomore year. Whatever, like I said, he plays against Modern Day his sophomore year, and mind you, he's going against like 7 or 8 D1 freaking D tackles, right? And he's like, Dad, every down they had a new freaking group of kids, and mind you, from the Tuhalamaka kid to the his friends, freaking Semi and friggin' Tom Tom, like kids that he's played with and or against, are across the line of scrimmage from him. Like I said, dogs, bro. At Bosco, friggin' Max Amasillo, like, dude, all these kids have been around each other for so many years, and he got to play against them. And so, junior year, lost to Sarah of Gardena, and then, mind you, his cousin is across at Sarah Gardena, who's now at freaking USC, that he committed to Utah, but now is at USC in Sweet Feet. Like, bro, I dialed everything in for my son to be surrounded by dogs, and all the dogs, and the talent, like they say, the cream always rises to the top, right? And so, for anybody that's out there that has issues with the recruiting process is tough. We dealt with it with Skylar when Skylar was going through softball. I explained that in that video. If you didn't see, go over to the next door and see that video where I talk about Skylar. But the hardest thing for Pono was being the fact that, man, every, like, his junior and senior year, mind you, fast forward, we left La Salle, transferred my son over to Milliken. Full circle, I had mentioned Romeo Pelham in that video. Ends up his coach his senior year. But mind you, my kid's done his shit against amazing athletes, against amazing talent for 4 years. And the only thing that's held him back in the recruiting process is a couple inches in height. And so, for all of you, please, 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 know what position your kid is playing and know whether or not he's able to obtain a full ride scholarship to the next level. And height and size and everything does matter. Because I've been watching my guys serve dudes that are 6'3" and up pancakes, down in and down out, and play in and play out, and it doesn't matter, because the college coaches, they look at size as they look at projections. And whoever made that rule up and crap up, man, God bless you, bro, because you're full of shit. Because I've just watched a 5'11" center for the Rams boo bop drop and stomp out 6'5" D tackles. The Rams or the Chargers, one of those two. But anyways, the one thing that people will never be able to measure is the size of your heart. So if any kids are watching this, Please take that into consideration when you're playing this game. And then parents as well. If your kid's not gonna reach a certain height, just sorry about it, man. That's just the nature of the beast. They want the kids with the long wingspan. They want the kids with the tall, height. And for some reason, these college coaches, a lot of them aren't that great. And I'm gonna catch heat for that shit too. But I don't give a. You know what? A lot of y'all haven't been able to coach that out of them. So, anyways, with that being said, it was a tough journey to watch my son during the recruiting process for the simple fact that a lot of people overlooked him because of his height, and that's okay. And it's something that I drive home into my son's mindset every single day, and it's something that I drive home to my kids at Kennedy High School that I coach every single day. When you play each down, you make sure that you let that person across the line of scrimmage from you feel you every single down. You make sure that those coaches across the field feel us every single down because they can't measure heart. They simply can't. And so that's why I love the game of football. And so with that being said, my son got the call from Black Hill State University, was able to establish that relationship with Coach Romeo Pelham, and I'm thankful to him every day for that. There's a lot of people that overlooked my son, and that's all good, and I'm gonna keep it at that. I'm gonna keep it at that. I don't feel salty at all. God places us in situations for a reason, and that's something that I drive home to my kids' heads. That's something I drive home to my son. And I was like, bro, you're there for a reason. You will not come back to my house until you obtain a business degree like you sought out to do. You will handle your business. You will show up. You will do what's required of you. You will do what you have to do to represent not only myself, but your mom and your sisters and everything that we stand for as a family. So I'm proud of him. Super excited. I'm going to hug him extra tight when we see him here in a week, and I will shoot that. But yeah, my son's out there doing what he has to do, grinding, and hopefully that he is able to obtain a starting spot. There's a possibility. I'll put it out there. He might get upset that I said this, but there's a possibility, and that's all through God, and that's all on God's will, and that's also God sees his heart, his struggle, his passion, his everything. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm gonna leave you with this: my relationship with my son. And before I go into the closing, you know, I remember at a young age when all three of my older ones were, Skylar, Pono, and Kenzie. He noticed right off the back, and this is something I had to throw in there. He was like, "Dad, can I tell you something?" And I said, "Yeah, man, you can tell me whatever you want." He's like, "You're not gonna get mad at me?" I said, "Man, that's something that we're not gonna do. That's something that I verbiage between my children and I are a lot different from normal Polynesian Samoan, you know, families verbiage. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your feelings. I want to hear what you have in between your ears. And even though, like the old school goes, like, man, if y'all ain't paying for bills, shut the hell up. That's not me. Even though I do throw that at them sometimes. But he goes, man, what is the deal, man? You treat me one way, and then you treat your girls another way. And it kind of hurt, man, because it's like, here I am doing anything and everything. But I didn't explain that part to him. I said, son, as men, we grow up with the world on our shoulders from a very young age. And that load doesn't get lightened up as we grow older. And so with my girls, I might treat them a little sweeter than I treat you, but I treat you according to how the world's going to treat you. Nobody's coming to save us, son. No one's coming to hold our hand when times get rough. And I don't care what anybody says and all this new way of thinking in society. I don't care, bro. I raised you to have 10 toes on the ground at all times so that one day when you have your own family, you will stand strong for them. Something that I've always taught him. I said, son, we may bend, but we will not break. Mark my words. We may fall, but we will not stay down on the ground. We will stand back up. We will pick ourselves off the ground and we will find a way. So I apologize to you, son. If I was ever too hard. But other than your mother, your dad, and God, no one gives a shit, bro. No one's coming to save us. No one's coming to help us. We have to stand this way so that you can maintain and continue on every day, regardless if you don't want to. For your future sons, your future daughters, that you will be able to bear the weight of the world on your back with the help of God. And with that being said, yeah, it's been another edition of Father Figure. Keeping it real always. And yeah, Kapono Stephen, Taulauniu Mao, I'm very proud of you. I'm very thankful for you having my back all these 19 years of your life. Proud of the young man you're becoming. You're going to be 120 times better father than I ever was. You're an amazing son to your mom, amazing brother to your sisters and your brother. Please go ahead and share, like, subscribe, and yeah, signing out. Y'all have a blessed rest of your Sunday, and good night.